Muito bem, bom dia a todos. É um prazer, um privilégio estar no contacto de todos agora. Vamos iniciar, na sequência do programa, o primeiro painel do Congresso Internacional de Contabilidade Pública, subordinado ao tema Contabilidade Pública e Indústria 4.0. E como sabem, os que nos estão a escutar, este é um painel que tem que ver com a harmonização da contabilidade pública, perspectivas nacionais e internacionais. Teremos 4 participantes que constam no programa. Vou também dar-lhes agora as boas-vindas em inglês, antes de passar à organização da forma como o painel vai ser desenvolvido. Good morning to all of you, and especially good morning to our participants in this program, in this panel. A warm welcome for coming, for being here with us, and for accepting to be part as speakers of this conference. Thank you for being here. This panel is about harmonization of public accounting, national and international perspectives, and I would like to welcome all of the 4 participants. Our panel is going to take place in an hour and a half, more or less. So I'd like you to be strict in the use of your time. Your presentations will be for a period of 15 up to 20 minutes, but please not more than that, because we're going to compromise the rest of the program. Thank you once again. I'll be very attentive of the use of your time. Let me now introduce each of participants. The first participant is Jan Caruthers. O Sr. Jan Caruthers é presidente do International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board, IPSAS, desde 2016 e é membro desde 2010. Jan Caruthers liderou o trabalho do IPSAS sobre sustentabilidade financeira a longo prazo e o alinhamento entre as CICP e as estatísticas financeiras governamentais. Tem trabalhado também trabalhou desde 99 no programa do Reino Unido de orçamento e relatórios por competências, liderando o programa Wall of Government Accounts. Ele, como sabem, sendo presidente da IPSAS, está muito por dentro destas matérias e, portanto, será um prazer e um gosto tê-lo aqui conosco. Mr. Jan Caruthers, thank you for being here with us, especially now for you. You will have 15 to 20 minutes to make a presentation. So I'd like to pass you the word now so that you can present your work and your ideas. Thank you for sharing them with us in this moment. Thank you very much.
Very pleased to be able to participate in this event. Obviously, unfortunately, only virtually, but I think nevertheless, I'm looking forward to a good discussion today. So, if I can start off, obviously, this is looking at the subject from the international perspective. And I thought it might be worth just reminding participants about who the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board actually is. We are a global financial reporting standard setter that focuses on public sector needs. And at the moment, the suite of standards that we have built over the last 20 years or so comprises 37 accrual-based IPSAS and also cash-basis standard. The tools which we use to develop those standards, I'll talk about a little bit more during my presentation, but broadly speaking, we have a conceptual framework which supports development of our standards. We look at whether to use international financial reporting standards or not, or where we can partially use those in our standard setting process. We also look at the statistical guidance, so we have a process for doing that. And all of that is done under a formal accountability framework overseen by the Independent Public Interest Committee, comprising representatives from World Bank, IMF, OECD, and the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions. And we also have an advisory group, the consultative advisory group, that give us advice as we develop our guidance from various different perspectives. And I think that's really important in terms of the topic of harmonisation. It's those different perspectives, and that certainly is present in the membership of the consultative advisory group, but it's also present in terms of the membership of the board. And just to show you that we are a physically and culturally diverse board. Those are the 18 board members of the IPSASB during the current year. You'll see from around the world, from a variety of jurisdictions, also a variety of backgrounds. So we have preparers of government financial statements, we have national standard setters in the public sector, we have academics, we have auditors, and I think that makes for a very rich debate, very challenging at times, but overall we are all very much focused on the public interest. In terms of the way that we approach our work, I think that overall umbrella is very important, strengthening public financial management through increasing adoption of the accrual-based standards. And that focus on accrual is very important in terms of transparency and accountability. Our work is focused in two areas: delivering the global standards and inspiring implementation. And I think if you look at the implementation context, again, that focuses very much on the harmonisation of information, because really the real driver is not that you produce good accounts, it's that accounting information is used for as many different purposes as possible. And so it's really about pushing out the use of accrual-based data, not just from accounts, but also, for example, into the national statistics that you use for macroeconomic analysis and decision taking. It's also about making the information useful and used for policy and for budget purposes. And then that information can be used for accountability purposes and decision making, not only by national legislatures, but also by the financial markets and also by the citizens as well. So there's a lot of different groups that we need to think about in terms of harmonisation, but it really is important that the same information is used as often as possible, which gives clarity both to decision making and accountability. So what are the specific challenges of the public sector? Well, these we articulate in the preface to our conceptual framework, and there are some very particular issues with accounting in the public sector, which are certainly much less present in the private sector. So we have, just working around that chart, non-exchange transactions, particularly taxation revenues is a clear example of that, but also provision of benefits and support to the population. And of course, we've seen that very strongly during the last year or so in terms of the pandemic. Accountability for the use of public funds, and therefore the real primacy of the approved budget for not only departments but other bodies. A longer perspective, I think, in terms of the finances of governments in particular, picking up things like the impact of climate change, population change, the long life of assets as well, public sector providing infrastructure like roads and so on, but also cultural and heritage responsibilities. Where do the boundaries of government as a service provider end, and where does its role as a regulator begin? And then, of course, that broader use of statistics for decision making, not just purely through the financial statements that I've referred to. And overall, we see these objectives in two parts, more clearly, I think, than in the private sector, of both decision-making and that very strong focus on accountability for the use of public money. And as I mentioned before, accrual-based information being needed to deliver both objectives. Cash reporting can only take you so far, particularly where you have situations where governments will enter into obligations both to their employees, but also more broadly, that may well only need to be satisfied a long way in the future. If you look at the extreme, for example, decommissioning nuclear power stations and so on, that will take place a long while in the future, but it is still there, and it's still important in terms of decisions on sustainability of public finances. So those are the specific characteristics that we need to address in terms of public sector reporting. But as I mentioned at the beginning, where it's appropriate that the same framework, the same economic substance as in the private sector is there, for example, employing staff, then we will draw on the ISB's documentation, its pronouncements in developing our own. So that first decision box, are there public sector issues that warrant a departure? If essentially what we're talking about is no, it is something like employing staff. Okay, you need to make some changes of terminology as in box 4, and you know, then you can actually produce a document that is relatively closely aligned with IFRS. On the other side of the screen, you know, if we look at should there be a separate project initiated, obvious example is taxation. We will have a separate project there. And then we have a group of projects in the middle where actually you don't need a separate project, but actually there are certain public sector specificities that need to be addressed. And we will then modify the ISB documents to produce the final IPSAS. Clearly, there is some grey in that area, but it's important that we make the decisions on those sorts of projects very transparently and that people have opportunity to comment on that. You can see that balance between public sector specific and aligning with IFRS in our current work programme. So it's a very broad-ranging programme, as you can see, focusing on revenue, expenditure, a lot of assets of the balance sheet, some important new topics like natural resources. But throughout that, what we're trying to do is focus on the needs of the public sector that align where appropriate with the relevant IFRS. So in our revenue project, for example, we're picking up the latest revenue standard, IFRS 15, similarly looking to align with the new guidance from, or the relatively new guidance from ISB on leases, measurements, proposing to pick up IFRS 13 there. So you can see that balance coming through in terms of our guidance, and that's the position at the moment, with 4 exposure drafts out for comment at the moment related to measurements, conceptual framework update, the new measurement standard for the public sector, but bringing in IFRS 13, and then also guidance on heritage and infrastructure in that, and finally assets held for sale and discontinued operations. And those documents are open for, if they all interrelate, they're open for comment until the autumn. What does that mean then in terms of the degree to which we focus on the public sector? Well, this chart shows you where we are at the moment, and going back to that process chart I showed you, the small quarter segment up at the top on the left-hand side shows those standards where we've just changed terminology. Down at the bottom, you have those pronouncements where it's entirely focused on the public sector. And you can see that's the picture at the moment. So around about a third of our guidance is wholly or mainly public sector focused. Now, over the next couple of years, with those projects that we have in place, that focus will increase to around 40% wholly or mainly public sector specific. The big change we see, though, in alignment is bringing in those more recent IFRSs. So that's the picture that we have at the moment. The box at the top shows where we're on an out-of-date version of the standard, moving through to the bottom where we're on the latest version of the standard, and we've included all the consequential amendments, annual improvements, and so on from that the ISB is issued. And we will see a very dramatic change as we come through those projects on leases, revenue and measurement, which we're aiming to complete by the end of 2022, a huge change there in terms of harmonisation. So we've picked up the latest of the IFRS literature at that stage, but we will also have increased the specificity for the public sector of our standard suite. Moving then to the statistical side, this is an area where we have been working consistently over a number of years, dating back to, as you can see, 2004. This was prior to the last update of the overarching system of national accounts. That was the first time that the if you like, the degree of alignment between the public sector, the IPSAS, and the statistical frameworks was explored for the first time, and attempts were made to move forward through the task force on harmonisation for public sector accounting, led by the IMF. We've participated in their GFS advisory committee since then, and we also have our own policy paper now, which clearly articulates the thought process that the board needs to go through in terms of thinking about how to address GFS issues in our work, and that was based on a consultation paper in 2012. We have the ability to make changes to our standards through the annual updates processes we've done, for example, in terms of aligning the guidance on single-use military equipment with the change guidance in the system of national accounts. And this is now picking up increasingly in terms of the preparatory work for the current updates of the international statistical standards, which is going to run over the next 5 years. So I mentioned our policy. Again, similarly, we'll look at whether there's a difference that we need to address between IPSAS and GFS. We'll then see whether we can do that through guidance. The existing guidance, can we make revisions to that, step 3, or can we, is that too significant to go through the annual improvements process and so on. So again, a very structured process for looking at the similarities and the differences. And again, I think really it's important to focus on the similarities and build on those rather than focusing on some of the differences between the framework. Looking then into the alignment opportunities through the International Statistical Standards Update, we are looking at those through the lens of, well, Category A, what's already aligned, Category B, opportunities to increase alignment, and there are a number of those, and what we're trying to do then is align those with the project plan for the update of the international statistical standards. Some opportunities are really just a question of changing terminology, maybe providing greater analysis of numbers and so on. Some are more significant in terms of major alignment opportunities, such as, for example, in terms of financial instruments. Is a good example. And we've also proposed to the statistical community that we add a few areas which are really related to taking the opportunity of us finalising our guidance, for example, on measurements, to get increased alignment between the frameworks. So finishing off then in terms of conclusions, I think one of the key factors is the very rapid use that we're seeing in the expansion of accrual information around the world. Currently, the update of the 2018 International Public Sector Financial Accountability Index is reaching its conclusion. At that stage, we were looking at 25% of governments on accrual around the world. A couple of years later, that's risen to 30%, probably looking at around 50% in 5 years' time, and maybe up to just over 70% in 10 years' time. So a very rapid transition to the use of accrual for governments around the world. I think experience has shown that wherever you have to adjust the underlying base data, you want to avoid that if you can, because whenever you have to make adjustments, there's a source data issue. Those adjustments may well not be capable of being audited, so there is a quality issue there. We do see opportunities for increased alignment. I mentioned both of those in the context of alignment with the private sector IFRS standards, but also with the International Statistical Standards Framework. That said, alignment is not a one-way street. Dialogue is required, particularly with regard to statistical guidance and IPSASB guidance, where you've got different professional groups that need to speak together. And certainly we're pleased that we've been able to participate already in some of the task forces that are looking at the issues in updating the statistical guidance, and we hope to continue that dialogue. And I think as a result of that, very significant opportunities to increase harmonisation, both with statistical standards, but also with IFRS. And that is a very important period, the next 5 years to 2025. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation, and I look forward to participating in the panel discussion later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carruthers, for your presentation, and thank you for respecting your share of time. Thank you for the good ideas you have given to us and explanations about the work that the IPSAS is being done. We now know the major concerns that IPSAS has and the major work it's been doing there. And thank you for your explanation. You're focused on public sector. Portugal has now created the figure of public accountant by law a few years ago, but unfortunately things haven't changed much since then. We hope that there will be some new developments on this issue, because we feel it's very important to have public accountants, just like the same way we have private accountants in companies in the market. I come from a school that teaches public administration and gives degrees in public administration, and we look forward for the regulation of this new profession, this new activity. So thank you very much for your focus on the public issues and matters. Thank you. I now pass the word to our next person, which is John Vernder. O Sr. John Vernder é diretor do Departamento de Estatísticas Macroeconómicas do Eurostat e é também chefe da unidade de metodologia das contas nacionais do Eurostat. O Eurostat, como sabem, é um serviço de estatística da União Europeia. O Sr. Vernder tem trabalhado em áreas relacionadas com contas nacionais por cerca de 20 anos ao nível europeu e, portanto, é uma pessoa também muito sabedora destas áreas da harmonização e da contabilidade numa perspectiva mais pública das contas e também dos números e das estatísticas. Eu passo-lhe a palavra. Mr. Vernder, now your 15 to 20 minutes to make a presentation. Thank you very much for being here once again. Good day to you, and we're looking forward to listening to you. Thank you.
Obrigado e bom dia a todos. Obrigado por seu amável convite. Lamento que o meu português não está melhor, por isso vou continuar em inglês. And that's enough pain for you for today. Good morning, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be able to present developments on European public sector accounting standards at this Congress. As you've kindly introduced me, Mr. President, I'm from Eurostat, and we've been working on the EPSAS project for a number of years. And I'd like to start by giving a bit of background and then develop the latest developments in the project. So this very much complements, I think, the presentation by Ian just now. So we'll draw the connections as we go along. So the start of the EPSAS project was indeed in the Budgetary Frameworks Directive, which was put together during the great financial crisis 10 years ago or more now. And the idea of this directive was to ensure across all EU member states that there should be in place public accounting systems that comprehensively cover broader government, containing the information needed to generate accrual data, and this is the link to the statistical standards in Europe, the European System of Accounts, and also, of course, the importance of internal control and independent audits. So with these principles, the European Commission was asked to assess the suitability of IPSAS for use in the member states. And indeed, that project was passed to Eurostat because Eurostat has a long history of experience in government financial statistics and government financial reporting, and indeed setting standards for statistical reporting. So it was seen as a natural place in the Commission for the work to continue. So in 2013, there was a European Commission report on the suitability of IPSASs for use within EU member states. And indeed, this underlined a strong need for harmonised accrual-based public sector accounting systems. Whilst the report mentioned issues, technical, conceptual and governance, which meant that it wasn't possible to say that IPSASs could be implemented in full or directly within EU member states. Nevertheless, the idea was that the IPSASs would form the suitable reference framework for the development of European public sector accounting standards. And I think it has to be said that many of the issues identified in 2013 have been very well addressed by the IPSAS board in the intervening years. I think there was a strong stress on harmonisation as the basis of a strong EU governance within the area of public sector accounting, and clearly a big opportunity to share best practice and experience across EU member states. So the IPSAS initiative was launched to provide harmonised accruals-based public sector accounting standards for the EU, and in doing so, giving that firm basis for understanding the financial position and performance of government entities, and not just at central government level, but all levels of government, both regional and local. And indeed, we can see the potential for accruals-based accounting overall, and obviously in Europe, through improving the evidence-based decision-making and accountability, which Ian well mentioned just now, supporting access to capital markets, the analysis of public finances, and also a potential which is very close to my heart, which is helping to produce good statistics and mitigating risks in producing those statistics. And we all know that government finance statistics are very heavily used in Europe for macro and fiscal policy purposes, the excessive deficit procedure, the debate around this, and we'll come back to that later. So the IPSAS approach over the last years has been voluntary and step-by-step progressive. And we have an ongoing phase right now, which is a broader initiative to increase fiscal transparency by promoting accruals accounting and IPSAS, and in parallel, developing a potential IPSAS framework in terms of governance and principles and standards. The phase 2 of the project, we're not there yet. I think that COVID has slowed things down, but we'll come back to that, is addressing comparability within and between the member states. So it's moving on from the importance of having an accruals-based accounting approach overall to the harmonization, the comparability question between the member states here in our union. In June 2019, we made a progress report which would actually take stock of where we were and move into the work that we've been doing in the last 2 years. And indeed, there was certainly an increased readiness of member states to implement accrual accounting, significant progress on technical preparations, and indeed a focus on the efforts in transition and costs. And the feeling was, and I think the feeling still is, as we'll see, that many member states in Europe have decided that accruals-based public sector accounting is the way forward, and they have very active projects to make that happen in the coming years. And so we have member states moving forward on their national trajectories, but at the same time, we're missing the benefits of having a European reference model behind that. So of course, there are IPSASs, and we see member states taking inspiration from IPSASs, but there is also this European question which remains, and I think that's the important aspect going forward.
In terms of the state of play, what we've been doing on the EPSAS project is to think about accounting maturity. That is, trying to monitor how the progress of EU member states in implementing accruals-based accounting. And for this, we use the measure of the IPSAS. We see the gap between the national public accounting and the suite of IPSAS standards. And indeed, these maturities are very useful because we have to think all the time about how EPSAS would impact on the member states, the benefits and the costs, but also for monitoring progress. So what we did was we launched a study together with our contractual partners to assess the accounting maturity, and also to use that information to try to think about potential costs of implementing a full accruals accounting system in the public sector, both backward looking, where are member states or where were they recently, but also in the future. So let's have a look at that kind of development. We made this project over a 5-year period, so from 2014 to 2019. And as you can see, the accounting maturities here, the darker colors are higher accounting maturities, the lighter are lower. And as you can see in this development over time, a number of countries have moved to a darker orange, and so we do see this darker orange creeping in bit by bit, and also a bit more of the middle orange as well. So clearly, over the last five years, up until 2019, there are more and more countries which are becoming more and more mature in terms of their maturity at central government level, we can see here. And also at local government level. Once again, we again see here that there is indeed an increasing accounting maturity, more dark orange across Europe, and all of that is very good news. And you can see on the map for Portugal, Portugal hasn't changed colour much, but of course, and I'm sure we'll hear about this later, the ongoing project in Portugal on accruals accounting in the public sector. Then looking forward, by 2025, from the responses that we received, we see that maturity is expected to increase further in central government to around 70, 75, 76%, but also in state and local government and marginally in social security funds. And where are the big increases which are planned? Greece, Malta, Cyprus, Portugal, Italy, are all there in terms of expected increases in accounting maturity over the next 4 years, and that's obviously very important to know that the direction of travel is positive. Now, with the impact of COVID-19, we've seen this impact, I think, in the EPSAS project and in public sector accounting in general, in 2 directions. The first direction, unfortunately, is that perhaps politicians, rightly so, are spending more of their energy on combating the crisis than on thinking about public sector accounting reform. And one can understand that in this crisis period. But at the same time, and as we look across in this slide, the enormous number of different public programs that have been launched with huge amounts of public money into the response to the COVID-19 crisis. And here we have such a big mixture of schemes, from direct cash benefit transfers through to changes in the tax system, through to equity investments and public guarantee schemes, and all the way through to support for the financial system. So indeed, we have an unprecedented level of government interventions across all of these parts. But the important factor is, how are we going to account for all of this, and how are we going to represent that in our financial statements in such a way that policymakers will be taking the right decisions as we hopefully recover from this crisis? And now more than ever, there's a need for high quality information for policy making, and there's a need for this greater transparency given the huge amounts at stake. It's reliable information for trust, and that needs to be kept. And I think indeed ensuring the proper use of the funds that have been spent and showing that they have been well accounted for and have been used properly is indeed an important aspect of that. So I think as we hopefully start to see the light of recovery from COVID this year, we do need to come back to our public sector accounting and do need to put that back in the spotlight as political attention will allow. So thank you very much for listening to me today, and that's the end of my presentation, and I'm very much looking forward to participating in the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Veringer. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for stressing the need of good data and good information and the growing of account maturities all across Europe and as well as in Portugal. Thank you very much. Thank you for stressing the huge need of high quality information and a greater transparency in our public accounts and public figures and numbers. Thank you very much for your presentation. Agora passo a palavra à senhora professora Susana Jorge. A senhora professora Susana Jorge é doutorada em Contabilidade e Finanças, é também professora catedrática com agregação na Faculdade de Economia da Universidade de Coimbra, se não estou enganado, é investigadora integrada no Centro de Investigação em Ciência Política da Universidade do Minho e colabora com o Centro, com o CBR da Universidade do Minho também. Muito obrigado também por fazer parte deste painel. A senhora professora está agora aqui a trabalhar na qualidade de presidente do Conselho Executivo da Rede de Pesquisas CIGAR, Comparative International Governmental Accounting Research, e, de acordo com a informação que tenho, os seus interesses de pesquisa estão nesta linha, incluem a contabilidade do setor público e a gestão financeira, por isso será um prazer e um gosto também ouvir agora a sua apresentação, com o mesmo limite de tempo que os colegas têm respeitado, a 15 a 20 minutos, estamos com margem, por isso não há problema. Muito obrigado por estar aqui, passo-lhe a palavra também, faz favor. Muito obrigado, senhora professora.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank Professor Catarino for my presentation and make just a slight correction. I'm not full professor yet, hopefully, so thank you for your promotion. And CEBER, Center of Research in Political Sciences from University of Minho, but CEBER for Business and Economics Research is from my university in Coimbra, so just to clarify. And I'm also happy to join such a great panel, and I'm happy to be the third to talk because my line of talking is coming precisely according to John Veringer and Jan Carruthers, so it's in the right place. And of course, I'm talking about the Portuguese situation. I'm very happy that I was able to participate in part of this reform as well as member of the Standard Setting Committee. So even if we didn't arrange our talks, we are converging in our conclusions, which is quite interesting. I'm starting to share my screen now. I hope technical issues work. And so I'm talking about how Portugal has been doing regarding public sector accounting harmonization and the way towards IPSAS. Back in the 90s, Portugal has accrual accounting in public sector since the 90s. We following the new NPM reforms and also following what was happening in business accounting. We made a big reform in public sector accounting starting in the 1990 with the Public Sector Accounting Basis Law, which ended up in approving a chart of accounts, we call it Public Sector Accounting Plan, introducing accrual accounting in public sector in 1997. And this accrual was used together with cash and cost accounting. So basically, we are having three subsystems in three parts of public sector financial reporting since the late 90s. This chart of accounts was adopted to parts of public administrations, health, local government, education, social security, as you can see. And but at a certain point in history, it became, of course, out of date and of course requiring changes. Why? Because at a certain point, of course, Portugal adopted the IFRSs, and the public sector accounting lost, the POC-P lost the conceptual basis, because it was based on business accounting as well. So the context of public sector accounting became fragmented, and the system was inconsistent because it was not aligned basically with the business accounting. So alignment was also an issue, and this was creating inconsistencies and particularly difficulties in consolidated accounts. Then, as you all know, Portugal entered in a serious financial crisis. Troika came, so we had external help. A memorandum of understanding was signed by Portugal and the funders in 2011, and because of that, we were pressured, of course, for better accountability regarding public sector financial management and accounts. And basically, we were pressured to move towards an IPSAS-based public sector accounting system. In this context, we were then in 2011. In 2012, there was a change in the governance of the Standard Setter Committee, and a special in the Standard Setter Commission, because our commission is formed by 2 committees, and the committee regarding to public sector accounting standards had a particular task of creating an IPSAS-based accounting system, which started to be developed at the beginning of 2013, and we were able to approve the first pack of legislation in September 11, 2015. This SNC-AP, the System of Accounting Standards for all public administrations, is to be applied to the whole of public administration, so endorsing already a preparation for whole of government accounts, including local government and some reclassified entities that, according to the European system of accounts, are considered non-mercantile entities, and they had to be reclassified within the state budget and put under public sector accounting and not business accounting as they were. A pretty brief characterization of the system we have and we are starting implementing. The system came from the IPSAS. It was adapted from IPSAS. It comprises 28 standards, 27 I would say normal standard, and 1 addressing a simplified regime, a conceptual framework for financial accounting, and a multidimensional chart of accounts. And with these 28 standards, we will be able to prepare individual, consolidated, and segmental reporting. And as I will show, we created 2 national standards that were not adapted from the IPSAS, and we created this chart of accounts that is supposed to make the connection between financial, the accounts allow the records for financial transactions, to identify the nature of budgetary expenditure and revenue, to make the link to national accounting, to the national accounts aggregates, and including to allow for the assets inventory. Unfortunately, this chart of accounts currently is not yet being applied to budgetary accounting, and also the link to the national accounts is still pending. These are our standards. I'm moving ahead. As you can see, they are all based in the IPSAS, except the last 3 standards were adapted from the Portuguese reality. So we had to prepare a standard on budgetary accounting and reporting, a standard in management accounting, and we have a standard for small entities, which I know, for example, the IPSAS are already considering, but the IPSAS still do not have a standard addressing differentiated reporting. This is our case. So basically, our system has 3 subsystems: budgetary, financial, and management accounting, whereas financial accounting is pretty much based on IPSAS. Budgetary accounting is very much national based, and it's still cash based, and I would say modified cash based. And the purpose is to record and to report on the budgetary process, managing the budget and accomplishing the budget. We also have management accounting, a standard that I would say it's not yet completely applied. And the idea is that this standard will provide information for entities to prepare performance indicators about the outcomes of their activities and projects, the cost of public, and allowing to assess the cost of public policies, basically. In the next slide, I will briefly address the content of each system, but just to highlight the main outputs. The main outputs of MCP 26 of budgetary reporting are, of course, estimated and reporting statements. As I said, they are still modified cash-based, and they allow to, for example, evaluate the performance, the budgetary performance, and also how revenue and expenditure have been accomplished, and also the multi-annual investment plan have been accomplished. There are also consolidated accounts for budgetary in budgetary terms. Financial accounting is pretty much based on IPSAS, as I said, so the same financial reporting statements, and there is an encouragement to prepare estimated financial statements with the idea of, in the future, address, I would say, accrual-based budgeting, but I think not in the near future. And there was this idea of creating the state as a reporting entity already to address the possibility, which we expect to be in mid-term, of preparing whole of government accounts. Then we have the management accounting. As I said, this standard allows entities to determine, for example, the costs underlying prices and fees to be charged for public services, the costs of fixed assets, environmental costs, and it addresses an activity-based costing system, and it also requires reporting some information about management accounting, namely, for example, comparing actual and estimated costs and costs compared to the prices or the fees charges for public services. Additionally, we have also a simplified regime to be able to, while addressing the differentiated reporting. This simplified regime is an option for smaller entities, and in fact, we have two simplified regimes for small and for micro entities. And this is, they are a universe of about 3,000 entities, as I will show in the next slide. And the idea of creating a simplified regime is because these entities are smaller in dimension, but also they have lower budgetary risk. So they can, of course, this is an option. If these entities want, they can use the general regime that I just presented. Basically, the simplified regime allows simplified reporting and reduced the disclosure obligations, and the limits for application of this simplified regime were defined with the help of the Court of Auditors. So for small entities, basically they have the three subsystems, but financial accounting is simplified, and small entities are classified as those that have budgetary paid expenditure between 1 million euro and 5 million euro, and the micro entities are basically, they are under budgetary paid expenditure that is under 1 million, and they basically use budgetary reporting, budgetary accounting and reporting, but for some of these micro entities, this is still very complex, or represents a very high complexity. What we had, so the system was approved in 2015. In 2016, the implementation strategy was to use pilot entities, there was a manual of implementation developed by the standard setter in 2016 and revised in 2017. And for the rest of the public administrations, they should start implementing in 2017. Unfortunately, this not happened, and it was a postponement to start in 2018. And for local government, only last year, municipalities start applying this new system, and only now they are preparing the first accounts on the basis of this system. Basically, the government alleged that the appropriate technical, legal, and institutional conditions were not in place in 2017, but some entities could voluntarily start implementing the system. During 2017, there was a dissemination strategy that was defined, but in this strategy, the instructions were very broad, just addressing, saying that we were needing generalized staff training, IT adaptations, support from the Standard Ethics Committee, and the establishing of a unit that should monitor the implementation of this reform, UNILEO. UNILEO was created, some of these actions were accomplished, but unfortunately, at the beginning of 2019, the Court of Auditors prepared a report saying that the implementation strategy was not being duly accomplished. The monitor process by the unit that was created for this purpose was not effectively put in practice, and was also by this time that the postponement for local government was issued. So these were all signs that unfortunately we were dealing with a lot of difficulties, and the system was revealing highly complex, despite we were having full accounting now for 20 years almost. There was a meeting, perhaps Mr. Carradas remember this, there was a meeting, IPSASB meeting in Lisbon in September 2019, and our Ministry of Finance, although reinforcing the commitment of going ahead with this reform, recognized some difficulties. I just translate some of these sentences in this slide. They were, of course, public sector accounting reform was within a broader public financial management reform. And although we want to go ahead with these, we have to be careful, a lot of prudence, because accounting has to be compatible with the rest of the reforms. We have to have the support of the right technology, and we cannot create big disturbance. Also in 2019, there was a study about the effectiveness of pilot entities, unfortunately showing that pilot entities didn't work out. Also, another academic study evidenced some problems with the IT systems, also with and also some lack of political and top management involvement. The chair of the Standard Ethics Committee unfortunately passed away, and there's still an acting chair until today, so no new chair has been appointed. However, the Standard Ethics Committee continue its work, giving support to the entities, and it produced so far 44 frequent asked questions, so guidance about frequent asked questions, although half of these 44 basically focused on budgetary reporting. Currently, using figures to 2019, what we have, according to the Court of Audits, who is the entity that currently is controlling the reporting on the basis of this new system, we had about a little bit more than 1,000 entities reporting according to this new system. The whole of public administrations, as you can see here, the universe for whole of government account is much higher, is about 5,500 entities, so we are up to 20%. But in terms of materiality, this 20% comprises the largest entities, because in fact, about 3,000 of these 5,500 entities are micro entities, and those are not yet implementing anything. And also local governments that are 380 municipalities only started this year The one you see in the slide is one municipality near Lisbon that started as pilot entity and today is a successful case. So my last question is and a last comment is the following. If now, then when? When are we going ahead with reform? When are we going ahead also with EPSAs as Mr. Rinda just presented? Unfortunately, this sentence, this question is not mine. I've adapted it to the Portuguese situation. Once the crisis passed and Troika left, the public sector accounting in Portugal the reform lost its impetus and its enthusiasm. But now we had COVID, and COVID, as we all know, brought extra spending, demanding for resources, impact on public sector entities' financial vulnerability. We know that assets and liabilities are for sure suffering impairments. Provisions and contingent liabilities have to be accounted for. There was a great increase in expenses and decrease in revenue, and of course, consequences for public sector long-term financial sustainability, in particular in Portugal, but of course, all over the world and in Europe. Moreover, as Mr. Rinda just also referred, we are having a bazooka, as I don't know, the bazooka is a Portuguese word for a military weapon that our Prime Minister always used, that we are receiving a bazooka of the European Union funds, and a big part of these funds are for financial recovery. So now it's urgent to use again this context of crisis and recovery and financial funds to finally take this opportunity and again move ahead or move definitely ahead with this public sector accounting reform. We need the whole picture of public sector entities and the government. We need this reform will also, with this EPSAS-based reform, will allow reliability, trust, will allow attract funders, and of course contribute to transparency and accountability, and ultimately to the economic recovery. So I rest my case here. Thank you for listening, and now I will pass to the chair and look forward for the debate as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well, Professor Susana Jorge. Thank you for your enthusiastic presentation. Muito obrigado. Deu para perceber que já percorremos um longo caminho nesta matéria, mas que ainda há um longo caminho a percorrer. Obrigado pelo seu inconformismo positivo, pelas suas palavras de incentivo, pela sua esperança também, que deposita em tudo o que está em curso, nos grupos de trabalho e tudo mais. Nós realmente precisamos de melhores contas públicas, mais eficientes, mais efetivas, mais accountability, para podermos, enfim, comparar com os rácios internacionais para os quais estamos trabalhando. Muito bem. Bom, agora passo à apresentação do Sr. Philippe Arrault. O Sr. Philippe Arrault é revisor oficial de contas em França e na Espanha, e depois de ter liderado a sua própria atividade profissional como contabilista certificado, ele é hoje Managing Partner for France at BDO, é também ex-presidente do Instituto Francês de Contabilistas Certificados, é membro do Conselho da IFAC desde 2016 até 2020, e durante todo este tempo ele foi responsável pelo Grupo Consultivo de Tecnologia. O Sr. Arrault é também presidente da Associação Mediterrânea de Contabilistas Certificados e atualmente é presidente da Associação Latino-Americana de Contabilistas Certificados da América do Sul e da Europa. Et maintenant, bonjour, Monsieur Philippe Arrault, je m'adresse à vous pour vous remercier de votre présence ici à cette conférence. Merci bien à vous et merci de rester et d'être avec nous. Vous avez 15-20 minutes pour votre présentation et nous sommes très heureux de vous avoir ici and we look forward to listening to you. So I'll pass you the word now. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado. Muito obrigado. Bom dia a todos. I have to speak English. It is an international event and English is a common language. So let me use the English language. And I just want to start confessing immediately that I'm not a specialist of public sector accounting. Like you said, I'm a certified public accountant in practice since more than 30 years now in 2 different countries, France and Spain. And also I have the experience of having assumed some responsibilities, the president of the National Institute of CPAs in France, the president of 3 European organizations, the network, ACEE, the European Federation of Accountants, EFAA, and currently the European Federation of Tax Advisors, ETAF, and also the president of 2 international organizations, the Mediterranean Federation, FCM, and currently Chilea, you mentioned, the International Organization of the Profession, grouping National Institute of CPAs of Europe and Latin America, and counting on the membership much appreciated of OCC. And I thank your President Paula Franco for the wonderful job she is performing for the Portuguese profession. And I have also served during 4 years till 2019 as a member of IFAC board. If I relate my life, so it is to say that I do have a global vision of the accounting profession at an institutional level, but overall at a practical level. And my contribution today will be limited to share my views and feeling on the topic, especially after the 3 excellent presentations we had this morning. And I will not compete with my colleagues, but it's not a conclusion, but let's say a global view. What has always grabbed my attention is to note that professional accountants have several ways in the world of entering operations into the accounts. How is it possible? How the same education may lead to different interpretations, to different understandings, to different issues, to different applications. It's strange to see that even inside international organizations working on harmonization, it is difficult to share same views and to agree between members. The problem is a conceptual one coming from the roots. Which roots? The culture. All is culture. It's not too much difficult to agree with neighbors, but it becomes more and more difficult to agree, let's say, with a distance. And then come differences between North and South, between East and West, all over the world. It's a matter of concerns, a matter of culture. The topic of accounting standards is always based on law, of course, and there is several kinds of law in the world. For us, for example, for Latin countries, our law come from the Romanic legacy, where everything is written, what influences the organization of the world society and of course of the economy. And it is a fundamental difference with the Anglo-Saxon law, speaking only of this one among many other ones. Having said that, and being aware of the difficulties to reach a consensus for an harmonization, then the time comes to work and to find solutions. It is not acceptable to think that accounting is not a matter to harmonize. Of course it is. The economic facts to register into books are the same everywhere. The expectations of understanding economic facts through financial statements are the same everywhere. Therefore, starting from the same point and trying to reach the same target, the travel between the 2 points should be the same. This travel is the bookkeeping, the application of accounting standards. But look what happens. Even inside the European Union, with a clear will to build a single market and to make barriers disappear, after more than 60 years today, we still not have the same accounting standards between the 27 member states. Of course, we have the IFRS, but it is limited to consolidated accounts for quoted groups. For social accounts in business, each one applies its own national standards. And for the public sector, it is more or less the same, even if we can note progresses. That is the reason why we do have to encourage and to support organizations like IPSAS board at international level and the IPSAS working group in Europe. Their work is tremendous and of utmost importance. Their main challenge is purely conceptual, and their worst enemies, I would say, are the brains. It's a matter of mind, a matter of change of mind, a matter of education. Speaking of public entities, we absolutely need to have the same understanding of their financial situation and to be able to compare from one country to another one, especially inside the EU, but not only. Today, we live in a global world. If our society is moving towards this global world, if the culture is more and more a global one, there is no reason not to do it for accounting startups. Furthermore, with the strengths today of digitalization, we have the tools and we have the processes for practicing in the same way. So I'm convinced that time has come for accelerating the harmonization process and to speak with one single voice. But the question is, which voice? Choosing an international startup does not mean necessarily to look for the best one and to impose it to the other one. We all know what does it mean at the end of the day, and what is the final issue of such an approach. It will be the Italian law, the law of the strongest one. An international standard should be, for me, it's my point of view, should be the result of exchanges between people coming from different countries and cultures, and the fruit of a long process comparisons, looking for the best practices everywhere. Only open-minded people are able to do so. The exercise is not to try to convince the other ones that his own startups are the best. The exercise is to understand the other ones and to take the best part of each. Nothing is more difficult than this international approach, this open-minded approach, forgetting his own culture and roots and his own private interests, working for the global community. It takes time, that's right, but this is the only road to success, to a sustainable success. And with such an approach, at the end of the day, there is a solid and a concrete result. Even if it is only a short hope, it is a step forward, and step by step we will issue. That is the reason why we must support fully the IPSAS board, and we must collaborate with the IPSAS board. We absolutely need high-level standards, high-quality financial information, and full transparency. And today, hoping the end of the COVID pandemic, we have to build a new world. We used to say in France, like our President Macron, that the day after should not be like the day before. Okay, so what to do? For our accounting purpose, the time has come for a better harmonization. I'm convinced on that. And we, as accountants, are part of the process. We should be convinced of this necessity. So that's nothing else. That's what I wanted to bring to your attention. And I thank you for your attention. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Philippe Parot, for your experience you have brought to us, for your deep reflections, for your knowledge, and for your mature ideas. Yes, for showing us that we need a world that may articulate the 2 points of view, the Anglo-Saxonic way of being and point of view, and as well as the Latin basis of principles of accountancy. So thank you as well for the relevance of education that you have stressed up, and the opening and the open-minded approach. I hope that in the further sessions we'll have time to discuss all these ideas. I thank to all of you, to all of the 4 members of this panel, for your excellent presentations, for the clearness, the brilliant ideas, how clear they were, for your slides that helped us to understand much better what your ideas were and your presentation. Thank you for being here with us once again. And this panel is finishing, so I'm now passing the voice and the word to the organization. And thank you once again. Merci bien, Monsieur Philippe Raoult. Et bonjour à vous.